morning on the show by phone, Will Flanders from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Good morning, Will. How are you?
Good morning. Doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Another beautiful Wisconsin day to look forward to. A little chilly out there. I don't know what it's like down where you are, but I was surprised.
Beautiful spring, 40-degree weather. So.
Yeah.
Or summer.
Right, yes. I guess we're not officially into summer until what? The 20-something? 21st, 22nd?
Something around there, yeah. We're getting close, though. It's a little bit chilly for that time of year, but we'll make it work.
Right. Well, we have to. What other choice is there? So I am glad to have you on the show this morning to talk about a recent victory that we can rejoice around. Of course, we can be cautiously optimistic for reasons we'll discuss as well, but the shared revenue and the I guess I would say both the Senate and the Assembly finally came to an agreement on the shared revenue plan here for Wisconsin, which means that we will also see funding for school choice, additional money for choice schools in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. With the governor's race in November. Obviously, we, as part of this coalition that we discussed on the show previously with groups like WMC and School Choice Wisconsin, Badger Institute, and others, we were a little bit pessimistic that something would be able to get done with Evers, staying in the governor's office. But, through a lot of work from some of the members of the coalition, we were able to come to a pretty exciting increase for the choice schools. Our goal for a long time has been let's fund kids equally no matter what school door they walk through. And while we don't get all the way there, and, we can discuss we may not want to get all the way there, we'd like to make school choice continue to be a more taxpayer-friendly alternative. We're much closer than we've ever been. And while I'm still running numbers, I think we might be now the most equal-funded school choice program in the country. So very exciting news.
Yeah, well, and as I alluded to, we have to be... Well, cross our fingers. Cross everything at this point because it could change drastically should the Supreme Court take up the conversation about whether or not we should be funding school choice here in Wisconsin. Do you share those concerns as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, just as the November election was concerning, to some extent the Supreme Court election was even more concerning. There is the potential, with a judge who's not fully tied to the state constitution, not tied to enforcing the laws as they're written, that they can sort of, come up with anything out of whole cloth. And with a court majority like that, there is the potential for a court challenge to the choice programs. So while our coalition work on funding was very successful, there's some other things we still need to get done that'll sort of insulate the program from some of those challenges, one of which is sort of complex and probably wouldn't want to go into a great deal of detail, but it's called decoupling, and that is where we no longer sort of have this pass-through system of property taxes. We have in the state constitution that local schools must be funded with local money, and, technically the choice program is not, but we'd like to take that technicality out of the case and just make it fully funded with state revenue, and that'll much more effectively insulate the program for many of these challenges from the radical left.
So, Will, can we talk a little bit about the coalition of organizations that have come together and why it was that Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty believed it was important to champion school choice here in Wisconsin?
Yes, I should also add AFP and AFC as groups that have been important members of the coalition over the year as well. But since I've worked at Will, for the last 7 years plus, school choice has always been a central issue to us. And the notion of funding equality, the notion that a child's value shouldn't change based on their zip code or based on the school door they walk through is really one of our most fundamental principles. And there are other groups around the state that felt the same way. And, we felt the time was right to push for more equality in funding. We've seen parental empowerment across the country. We've seen families getting more and more interested and concerned with what's going on in their public school system, wanting alternatives. So we knew there was momentum behind it, and it seemed like the right time to make a move. And it turns out it was the right time. Again, even given the outcome of the governor's race, we were still able to sort of capture that momentum and get the ball across the finish line there.
So let's talk about the increase in money and what that means. Well, I'll say increase in money for choice schools and what that means for, well, the individual child and frankly the individual schools that are part of the choice program.
Yeah, so what we know is, absolutely, unequivocally at the high school level, a lot of the schools in the state, in the Milwaukee area as well as the rest of the state that are focused on serving high school students were really struggling. They were at $9,000 per student. Without any context, that may sound like quite a lot, but when you compare it to public schools that are over $15,000 per student, you can see there's quite a disparity there. Under the new plan, they're going to move the high school level to almost $12,000 per kid, $11,993, so very close to that $12,000 level. And what School Choice Wisconsin, a key part of the coalition, heard from their schools is that level of funding would be sufficient to make these schools sustainable. We've seen high schools closing in the choice program in recent years just because it's simply not sustainable, given the massive inflation we've had in recent years and other factors. The competition for teachers has been very challenging. This level of funding should make it much more sustainable, much less likely to see schools close, and also increase the potential that schools will expand and offer more seats. And as we think about the statewide program, the Wisconsin Parental Choice Program, that's critical. We're about to see the enrollment caps come off, where districts around the state will no longer be able to limit the number of kids that are enrolled, and that'll mean that schools that are maybe more focused on choice students can open, and existing private schools might be able to open up more seats with this level of funding.
Well, and I think what's also particularly exciting, and that's something you mentioned in the opening of our conversation, is that Wisconsin is the leader in the United States with the first school choice program, and I think that's something to be proud of, and I guess I'm wondering if there are other, well, I would say probably more Republican-dominated states that have similar programs and maybe would take a cue from what has happened here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we've seen in recent years, until this year, is that we've sort of seen some other states pull ahead of Wisconsin in school choice. As you mentioned, we had the first school choice program in the nation in Milwaukee in 1990, and that was a great model for states around the country. But in recent years, we've seen states like Florida and Arizona open up eligibility for students more than what we have here. And that's another thing we still, would love to see change, and we'll continue to work on, is getting rid of the income limits on the choice program. But this does put Wisconsin back into a leading role, again, by getting such close funding levels to what public schools are getting. This is something no other choice program, to my knowledge, has been able to fully achieve. Many of them get similar amounts of funding to the state portion of funding, but not the overall funding that students get between state and local funding, and that's what we've achieved here. So absolutely, I think it'll make Wisconsin once again a model for those looking to implement school choice nationwide.
Oh, I hope we can hang on to it. And finally, we'll talk briefly about what could happen if the state Supreme Court obviously any lawsuits that would be filed would have to go through the lower courts first. But I guess we can anticipate that, and thankfully we have organizations like yours, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, that will defend school choice. But to think that there are those on the left that seem to think that it isn't important for children to have a choice in their schools and for their parents to be able to choose the best option based on the individual needs of the student.
Yeah, it's crazy to believe in this day and age that folks still will be willing to go on the record and say they don't believe students should have options. One of the best examples is Chris Larson, Senator Chris Larson from the Milwaukee area, routinely out there criticizing choice, criticizing this deal for increasing funding for choice, but he went to a private high school. And essentially what he's saying when he makes statements like that is he's wanting to deny lower-income families and those that can't afford options the same ability he had to go to a private school. The only area where the left appears to want accountability is when it comes to the education of children. And you can ask yourself why that might be the case. You might want to look at where some of the major funders and the major voting bases for the Democratic Party are. But what we know is that the Minocqua Brewing Company, with their sort of arm that's focused on lawsuits, is already telegraphing that they're going to be filing a lawsuit essentially to try to end the school choice program. So again, while this is a huge victory and we should be celebrating, we do have to maintain those concerns. And you're absolutely right. Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, not me because I'm the non-lawyer in the office, but our legal side will be on the ball on that and working to fight that as strongly as we can.
Boy, well, I guess if you can't sell a good tasting beer, that's what you got to focus your attention on. I guess that's why can't even say it. Minocqua Brewing would do what they're doing. But well, Will Flanders, thank you. I appreciate you joining me this morning, and it's always a positive to be able to share some great news, and particularly with regard to school choice here in Wisconsin. I hope you have a great week.
Absolutely, you as well. Thank you.
We'll talk again soon.